Hello and welcome in to this week's edition of the High School OT Press Box. Only 2 more days until the athletic season begins. Very exciting times in all parts of the state. Let's get into some news, though, that went down over the past week. We will start with the NCCA East-West All-Star Games. They went on last week in Greensboro, North Carolina. Monday, the basketball games. They were a great showing for the East All-Stars. 25 points for Apex Friendships. Jasmine Navarre, the Campbell recruit, gets East Girls MVP. Then in the boys game, a 21-4 run in the third quarter is what sends the East All-Stars past to the West. That run was fueled by Swansboro's Jermaine Cunningham, who took home Most Valuable Player honors in that one. Moving over to Tuesday's soccer action, it looked like the East was just going to run away with these All-Star games. In the final 10 minutes of that girls soccer match, the East went up 3-1, but then South Mex Julia Greer scored twice within the span of about a minute and ended up tying the match 3-3. She had a goal and then she had a PK. So that one ends in a draw, and then a really thrilling back and forth boys game that night. The East took the lead early in the second half. Angel Ortiz Orsonio, if you remember the name from the 1A state championships last fall, the Mount Airy grad, was the MVP of that game. He ties the match at 1-1, then gives the West the lead 2-1. And then in the final minutes, Landon Lucas of JH Rose connects on a free kick from about 18 yards out, and that game ends in a draw as well, 2-2. 3 goals in the final 10 minutes of the girls' match, and then 3 lead changes in the final 10 minutes of the boys' match out in Greensboro. And as we had mentioned last week, the football East-West All-Star game now in December at Jamison Stadium on the campus of Grimsley High School. Some more news across the area. On Monday, during the basketball East-West All-Star game, former Garner star Nyheim Hines inked a deal, and it continues his NFL journey as the Los Angeles Chargers sign the leader in kick return touchdowns from a few years ago in the NFL. Hines obviously has missed the last couple of seasons after suffering an ACL and LCL injury and a jet ski accident out at Lake Norman. He rushed for over 7,000 total yards, 126 touchdowns for the Trojans, and had a very nice 3-year career at NC State. So far in the NFL, he has 22 touchdowns to his name. And if you have not already seen WRL TV's Pat Welter went down to Union County, where Nyheim was working out in the days prior to the Chargers signing him. Pat did a really nice story on what his journey has been to get back to the NFL and what he has had to go through and what it means to him. And, you know, obviously his family is very strong to him. So representing his mother, representing his family, and honestly just working and overcoming all of the obstacles that are associated with the injury that he suffered a couple seasons ago. Other news from this week around the state: high school OTs, all state teams for the year for 2024-2025. They're done. They're over. Softball, baseball came out. 10 3-time members in baseball. Over 30 players made the team for the second time or more. 14 3-time members in softball made the team. 44 players with multiple selections there. And then 4-time softball all-state members, including Charlotte Christian catcher Anna Hindi. It was she was a first-time selection 3 of the 4 years that she made the team. I'm going to bring in J. Mike Blake here, who helps oversee a lot of these all-state teams. J. Mike, you know, it's never easy to go through these baseball, softball teams, not only because there's so many names to choose from. The depth in this state in these 2 sports in particular is one that I think exceeds a lot of different sports.
Yeah, I think whether you are a sports editor just over one county or a small area, or you're doing what we do, trying to do an all-state team, these are the 2 hardest sports to kind of pick out. I mean, softball is, to me, the absolute hardest, because everybody you look at hits about 430 or 440 with 30 RBIs and 30 hits, like all the stat totals. and averages kind of look the same. So you're actually looking at, who you played. You're looking at, maybe OPS or like opposing batting average for these pitchers to just try to get a better sense of what these numbers mean. Also, it doesn't help that for us, if you make a coaches all-state team, you're automatically kind of on our radar and nominated to make our all-state team. Now, no one has to be nominated to make the team, but it does help. However, in softball, the coaches there put 450 girls on their all-state team. So that means we are looking at 450 names automatically, and it creates so much extra work. Sometimes, I mean, literally, there are girls in the all-state team. I'm not trying to, take shots at anyone, who have ERAs over 4, who have batting averages under 300, and they are all-state. And I think if you worked out there are not even 450 softball teams in this state, which means if you start for your high school softball team, you have a greater than 10% chance at being on an all-state team at some point in your career. Like my cousin was a 4-time coaches all-state player. She's very good. She went to Barton and played at Campbell. Her graduate year, got to play in the regional and the College World Series. But 4 times, like, whoa, like it kind of took away how she definitely earned a spot in those junior and senior years because she had already made it freshman and sophomore year. So that would be my only thing. Like, with love, softball coaches, let's try to trim down that list now that we can hit the reset button with 8 classifications. Baseball, on the other hand, I don't think it's necessarily as hard as softball. There's some differentiation that happens, but it is the hardest one to make, I think, in any sport. You have guys who are going to be drafted in the major leagues who, in a couple of years after college, who didn't make our team because maybe things just didn't work out their senior year. The season is short. If you are a pitcher, you're only going to take the mound maybe like 8 or 9 times. And if you don't have your best stuff on a couple of those nights, all of a sudden your ERA and all these other stats that we kind of look at and sift through, and you're like, hey, you weren't actually as dominant as these other people. And there's so much talent going to all different schools. I mean, this year alone, this has never happened for us in our 5 years of doing it. But this year we had 6 guys who were drafted by the major leagues make our team. And only 5 of the 6 were on first team. So so if you do make that team in baseball, even if it's honorable mention, just know your name is with guys who will eventually be drafted and go on to maybe work their way into the majors. I don't think there's too many other sports in the state where you can say there are guys on honorable mention who are going to make it to the league. If you're talking about NFL, NBA, or anything else for that matter. So again, softball, hardest for us to decide and pick. Baseball, the hardest one for the students to make. There were a few guys who we've had over the years who make the first team as a junior, and then senior year, maybe it's partly because they're on everyone's radar, they don't make it. They don't make the team at all their senior year. So those repeat selections definitely earned it. It's not easy to do.
As I said, 30 players were repeat selections on this year's team. And as J. Mike and I have covered in previous episodes as well, it is very difficult to make one of these teams. And with it being, built out by position, if you're a third team catcher, that means you're one of the 6 best catchers in the state, essentially, which is very impressive. And, another thing, as J. Mike's kind of going through this and breaking this down, it's not entirely a statistical based honor.
Right.
But you have to walk a fine line between, that kid's off to a Power 4 school and he is doing XYZ, or he got drafted against a kid who, quite frankly, had amazing stats. Like, you have to reward the kids who had phenomenal statistical years, and then you also have to understand where you can slot in the kids who may not have had the year that matches up with what their statistics may or could be, but we kind of just the eye test and we know and we can see, like, okay, that kid is one of the best kids in the state. So it's a mix of the two. I think a good example, J. Mike, of what J. Mike was saying is like Tyler Baird, who pitched at Huff. He was a selection this year to the team of Vanderbilt commit. If you hear a Vanderbilt baseball commit, you're like, yeah, that kid's legitimate. He got invited out to the MLB draft combine in Arizona prior to the draft. He went undrafted, but, a year ago, he didn't make the all-state team because he didn't have the numbers for it. He had a high ERA, and it just was not a good year for him. And then he turns it around this year, puts together a sub-1 ERA, and you're like, oh, there's the Vandy commit. No, and makes the team this year around. So, like, again, he was a borderline, last year we were talking about it. Does Tyler Baird make the team? He, ultimately was on the outside looking in on last year's team, but it's not because we don't think he's good. It's just there's so many names that you have to get in here that you're like, can we put a kid with a 4 ERA on here? Even though we know he's going to XYZ school. But luckily, in the case of a kid like Baird, he rebounded nicely.
Yeah, you have to draw the line somewhere, right? Between, this person is talented but didn't have the numbers versus the guy who had the numbers who, honestly, you may actually find yourself in a few years, that guy who had great numbers, he goes to a junior college and then he transfers and all of a sudden he's being drafted out of a Power 4 school in a couple of years. So it is, like you said, kind of trust your eyes a little bit and also kind of meld these things together. The reason stats do matter, however, is I've known all-state teams in other sports in previous years. I mean, I'm talking like a decade ago. That would basically, their preseason all-state team was going to be their end-of-season all-state team, and they did not do the research to know that some of their guys were injured after the first couple of weeks and didn't play. So they would have, congratulations to all-state player, the safety from, somewhere in the Sandhills, and it's like, well, that safety only played 3 games. You don't know that because you didn't look up any stats. That's why we do our homework at High School OT and try to make sure everyone has the things that back up their selection. Sometimes it catches us by surprise or off guard. We weren't expecting the numbers to be so good or the numbers to not be as good. But we're always trying to look at everything we possibly can so that our all-state team is as authentic and authoritative as it can possibly be.
That is J. Mike Blake breaking down the High School OT baseball and softball all-state teams. If you have not gone and checked them out, they are on High School OT right now. We're going to take a quick break, and then Joel Bryant's going to join the show on Sunday. The High School OT preseason statewide football top 25 rankings came out. He's going to break down all of those picks and where those teams stand. You are watching the High School OT Press Box. Welcome back into the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta now joined by High School OT's Joel Bryant. Joel, a very exciting time. Fall sports are starting up, and High School OT statewide and area code rankings are starting to drop on Sunday. The football statewide top 25 list came out. Let's dive right into it. West Charlotte, Joel, they are your preseason number 1. That is your preseason top 10 there. West Charlotte, Grimsley, Huff, Weddington, Cardinal Gibbons, Providence Day, Rollsville, Millbrook, Mooresville, and Independence. Joel, let's start right at the top with the Lions. West Charlotte making the jump as the 3A state champions all the way up to 8A.
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out to me about that team last year was just how young they were. In the state championship game, they had sophomores and freshmen making plays. In terms of the seniors that were gone from last year's team, it's not quite as vast as what we see from Grimsley and some of these other teams where they just had these star seniors graduate. There were some good players, of course, but the heart of that team wasn't those junior, sophomore, and freshman classes. And I feel like they just got even better this offseason. All those kids are going to be a year more mature. They're going to be a year more developed. And it's a very scary team. They can come at you in all directions. The defense was just swarming to that 71st offense in the state championship game. And I just think that they're going to keep making step up this year. In terms of them being number 1 over Grimsley, I think that was kind of a tough call. Obviously, Grimsley is the best player in the state, and the quarterback Faison Brandon. But I think West Charlotte in general, the depth that they have, the way they can come at you, from multiple different angles on defense. And then their quarterback as well, Jamori Nichols, is extremely impressive. He's a very, very accurate passer. I think they just have pretty much everything you can want in a high school football team.
Yeah, you and I this morning were kind of going back and forth on, 1 and 2 and how those look, because there are a couple different ways that you can kind of look at these teams and picture them as a number 1 or a number 2 in the state. Both have very legitimate arguments, but I think one of the unique things is, as you said, it's not going to take very long for us to figure out the answer to this question, because they play each other week 1 in the Keep Pounding Classic at Bank of America Stadium. How exciting is that?
It's very exciting. I can't wait to see the result of it. That's the reason why I'm sleeping pretty good right now. I'm not, tossing and turning over the 1 versus number 2, because we're going to find out very soon here. So it's not going to be like a big mystery that weighs on us all season. That game is going to be something. I mean, Grimsley has basically all of Faison's top receivers are back. So the passing attack for Grimsley is going to be very good. But if there is a secondary in the state that I would trust to kind of combat that passing attack, it is West Charlotte's or maybe Huff's. But West Charlotte has so many guys that can throw at you in the secondary. It's going to be quite a matchup, that kind of passing attack versus the passing defense. And the thing with Grimsley, I think last year they had 3 guys who I thought were within the 10 best players in the state. So of course Faison, and then the running back Mitchell Summers, then the defensive end Bryce Davis. Summers and Davis are gone. We can't just ignore that those 2 players are gone. Those 2 players were such big parts of that team. There's a lot of talent coming back on Grimsley. That's why they're number 2. But in terms of kind of the number 1 decision, it's kind of hard to ignore the loss of that 2,000-yard running back and then the 20-plus sack top 100 player going to Duke.
We now jump into the 11 through 20 teams that made the high school OT statewide top 25. Richmond, the Raiders, come in at 11. They were an up-and-coming team last year who took some monumental steps forward. Mallard Creek at 12, Reagan at 13, Crest, West Forsyth, Reedsville, Clayton, Jordan, Ashbrook, and Hoggard. Joel, when you look at this top 20 now, there are a couple programs that made some steps in the right direction last year, but you really think they can take a large step forward in 2025. Some of those programs that come to mind are Mooresville, Millbrook, Reagan, Ashbrook, teams that are here in the top 20, but maybe last year at this point of the year, we weren't really considering them as a bona fide top program in the state.
Yeah, just more teams where their best players last year were juniors. So they were very good last year when they were kind of led by juniors. And now all those players are going to be seniors this year. They're more mature. They're better. Just really fascinating to see kind of the second step that these programs make. There's lots of teams in this top 10 to 20 area that I could imagine them jumping up in the top 10 very easily. It's just a matter of them kind of going out and proving it. This West Forsyth team at number 15, they might have the best offensive line in North Carolina. And there's a lot of new faces on that team, so that's why they're kind of at 15. They're very talented, but it's just kind of a wait-and-see game of how well are they going to mesh early on? Are they going to take some time to get together to kind of get everything figured out? But that's a very talented team, especially on the lines. The 4-star PJ Dean, he's an incredible player. They have other guys in that line, too, who are also 300 pounds and can move people. So that's one of the teams looking forward to in this kind of 10 to 20 area. Reedsville, of course, obviously, they have 2 of the best players in the state in Kendra Harrison and Deontay Neal, but that senior class they just graduated was pretty good. There's some pretty good players in that senior class, so I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up in the top 10, but now they're kind of in a wait and prove it kind of area.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, West Forsyth, they're going to be in that conference there with Reagan, and Reagan made it pretty high for a team that has the record that they had a year ago, but I think one thing that, weighed in as a big factor to that, Joel, is the return of Jacob Smith, the NC State quarterback who missed a lot of last year with an injury.
Yeah, Jacob Smith is one of the biggest arms in the state. Really, really good arm talent. They lost him so early last year, and they're still competitive. And that team was so young last year. They had a freshman running back who broke off for a kind of breakout 1,000-yard season. He's back, of course, as a sophomore. But Jacob Smith coming back for his last season before he gets to NC State as both a football and baseball player. I know he has a lot he wants to prove this year, and hopefully he can stay healthy for them.
Let's go to the 21 through 25 of the high school OT statewide football rankings. A couple of state champions in the mix here. Tarboro and Monroe, 23-24. The Vikings won the 1A title, and then Monroe won the 2A title. 71st, who played in that 3A championship last year, They are at 21. Hickory, who was in the 3A title game 2 years ago against 71st, they're at 22. And then Irwin, who is one of the top teams in the 828 area code this fall, comes in at 25. Joel, in those 5 teams that just snuck into the rankings, as I mentioned, a couple of state champions from a year ago, what stands out about these 5 programs?
Yeah, this kind of set is just kind of like the We Get It group. All these programs have been so good, and it's hard to kind of leave them out of a top 25. So I think they're all going to be pretty good, and we just don't really want to leave, a Hickory and a Monroe out, a 71st out, even though they lost, some really good seniors. There were some good players, that were kind of playing smaller roles last year. They're coming up to, have those big roles this year. These kind of programs just can't really bet against in this kind of situation. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these teams end up being better than this, especially Hickory. I think Hickory might take people by surprise. That JV team, I don't think lost a game over the past 2 seasons. I know that the senior class they had with Brady Stober and Jamie Little, Isaiah Lackey, obviously they're going to miss those 3 stars, but they have so much talent in that program coming up. Very fascinating to see that team. And Tarboro, being the only 2A team in this top 25, they're there for a reason. That whole rushing attack they have is back from last year. The offensive line is going to be good again. They are very, very talented for a 2A team. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up cracking the top 15 at some point this year.
Then a couple of teams, there were a collection of teams that are just sniffing getting into the rankings: Northeastern, Robinson, Leesville, East Lincoln, Southeast. Among them, these are teams that, Joel, I think both of us suspect that, if a team or two in this top 25 falters over the first week or 2 of the season, and these teams take care of business, they will be right in the thick of things pretty early on in our rankings, no?
Yeah, there's plenty of teams that, we hate to leave out. Contrary to popular belief, we don't hate all the teams that don't make it. There's probably a good solid 15 teams that I could make an argument to be in this top 25. It just couldn't quite do it, this time around. But yeah, there's going to be some new teams that come up into this, because obviously we're going to be wrong on some of these teams. Some of these teams are going to lose games we don't expect. Some of them are going to lose games, frankly, in ways that just kind of shock us. So there's going to be some changes, as with all preseason top 25s. They always change. And we have a lot of teams, on the outside waiting to get in.
And as we always say, there's 300, 400 football teams in the state of North Carolina. So even if you are 26 or 30, you are still one of the top programs and the elite of the elite. That's Joel Bryant breaking down the statewide top 25 football rankings that came out on Sunday. You can stay tuned throughout the week as area code rankings will be dropping for each region, and then other fall sports rankings will be coming out in the statewide polls. We're going to take one more quick break. We'll come on back, and in the theme of sports starting up on Wednesday, we're going to dive into some coaches changes that have happened across football, basketball, soccer, volleyball, just things that kind of stuck out to us as we saw some of the movement in the coaching wire over the past offseason. You are tuned in to the High School OT Press Box. Welcome back into the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta bringing in High School OTs J. Mike Blake and Joel Bryant. We alluded to it right before the break there, but obviously the coaching wire across the state can have some shocking news that comes out and some surprises along the way. Joel, I'm going to start with you. Well, let's talk football. Almost 70 football coaching changes coming into this fall. So that means 69 different programs will go into practice on Wednesday with a new head coach. Some of them are familiar faces like Butler, who brought back Brian Hales, and Eastern Alamance, who has John Kirby back on an interim basis. They were just head coaches for these programs 2 seasons ago. As you go down this list and look at some of these notable programs that have made coaching changes, and then maybe there are some programs where maybe they haven't had the most success over the past couple of seasons, but you feel like their new leader is primed to bring the program to the forefront. Who stands out to you, Joel?
Yeah, the Butler one was kind of crazy hearing Hales come back after a year of Glenwood Farabee. I think for a guy like Hales and also Coach Kirby at Eastern Alamance, I feel like for these guys that were at their programs for so long and they were just so good for that the first year that they leave, for the team just kind of not to have the great season that they wanted to have. Frankly, both those teams are kind of underwhelming last year based on what we thought they'd be. I'm not saying that this is the full reason why they came back, but when the opportunity comes up, that the position's already open a year later, you can see why they'd want to get back into it and kind of just steady the ship, kind of try to get back to what they had at when they were the head coach the first time around. And then the Chambers one I think is very interesting. When they went out and got Captain Marlin, that's a huge name, obviously former NFL player, former Panthers player. You can see what they're trying to do. A lot of the talent, I think, in Charlotte has kind of gone back to different programs where they were all, frankly, going to Chambers for a while there. And getting someone like Captain Marlin, he has the chops, he has the pedigree to kind of, convince these kids, like, yeah, you should be staying here at Chambers and playing here. So very fascinating to see how they do. That's a pretty good hire. I think, over the next 3 years, we'll see that one really pay off well.
And then there's some programs, Joel, on here who have had some really storied head coaches and have made a lot of deep runs into the playoffs. And there's some promotions from within or some notable familiar faces who have now risen up to take on the coaching role. Robbinsville comes to mind, New Hanover, Randleman, Mountain Heritage, another team that you're pretty high on. What is it about those coaching hires that stand out to you?
Well, for Mountain Heritage and Robbinsville, you like that they kept it in the program. Obviously, those two guys, Coach Ford and Coach Fuller, that they were under the previous guys for a while there. So they know kind of how the program should run. They're not going to really change anything too much of what's kind of worked in the past. They figure is going to work into the future. So yeah, I really like those two hires there, and it's good that those programs are not going to have too much of a fall off with those guys coming back.
And then lastly, are there any programs that stick out to you as you look to this upcoming season? Is there a young new head coach, or is there a program that you just feel like made a home run hire and you're just excited to see them get going this year?
I'm fascinated to see Bettingfield and Wilson. They hired Riley Hurdle from Tarboro. He's kind of one of the guys that's doing the Tarboro T stuff. So they got him over there from a county over, basically. And Bettingfield, they kind of struggled of late, but they've had some really good teams, particularly back in the 2010s when they kind of really broke out and had these playoff teams. Wilson's an interesting town, interesting city. Things can change very fast in Wilson, so curious to see how they kind of adapt that Tarboro T there.
Now, Mike, let's talk a little bit about athletic director changes that have gone on. Obviously, there's more than just this list, but when that June 1, July 1 rolled around, there were a lot of changes that were made to some pretty prominent programs, and we've seen some pretty big names make some moves. Any standout on here, Mike?
Certainly, Tom Jamerson. Kind of what happened in the 7-4 there. Tom Jamerson now at Providence, Justin Frazier, and Marvin Ridge. These are like some of the best athletic programs. Huff with Derek Butler. Just a number of really deep athletic departments. It's not just one or two programs. The one I'm really interested in, we'll see the fruits down the road, but Joseph Sharrow at Felton Grove, that's a great choice. I know he came from Jordan, but you have to remember before he was at Jordan, he was doing great things at Vance County when they first merged Northern Vance and Southern Vance. So that's essentially like starting a brand new school. And then he goes from starting that school and trying to get the branding right. They were the only Vipers in the state. He was doing good things at Southern Vance before they consolidated. And now he gets to do that again at Felton Grove, which is really trying to establish its own identity. And once again, they are the only mascot of their kind in the state. They're the only Galaxy, whereas previously he was the only Viper. So home run hire. If Joseph Sharrow applies, I think he's going to get the job to get Felton Grove off the ground and establish an identity in a very crowded Southern Wake area.
Yeah, Joel, you're pretty high on Sharrow as well. And
Yeah.
If you have not seen already, just recently on High School OT, Joel helped put out the news of Fulton Grove, except for wrestling, has put out their entire coaching staff for this upcoming year. And there were some pretty big names on that list, Joel.
Yeah, I think everyone except for I think the boys basketball program got a head coach that has been a head coach before. So they've done a good job getting experience in that athletic department. They think they can start fast. And that area that they're coming into, it's kind of a mixture of Apex and Bill Creek and Apex Friendship and Holly Springs. The kind of sports that those schools are good at. I wouldn't be surprised if Felton Grove kind of puts their stake down on some sports early.
All right, now, J. Mike, we saw a lot of basketball this past summer and a lot of new faces on sidelines. And the boys' side, Alexander Central, they got Grant Hodges, who was very successful over at Lake Norman. Jason Cosby, who we just saw coach in the East-West All-Star Game as an assistant for North Rowan. On Monday, he's going to be taking over at Cox Mill. Bo May over at Huff. Chris Cherry, a state championship winning coach and then an athletic director at South Central. He stays in Pitt County, goes to John Paul II. Myers Park, Dory Hines, that is a nice pickup for them. A year ago, they had Andrew Glover and made it to the third round of the state playoffs. Donald Williams, one of the greatest scorers in the state of North Carolina, he takes over at South Garner. A name that really kind of shocked all of us when we saw it drop was Terry Sanford being able to pull Jake Wolfel down from South Granville. And then Bryant Edwards, who led Lumberton to some very lengthy playoff runs over the last couple of years and a co-state championship, leaving Lumberton to go to West Brunswick. And then Antoine Pittman, who helped lead North Pitt girls to a state championship 2 years ago, he heads over to West Craven. J. Mike, any of these names really stand out or as you look at this list?
Oh man, these are a lot of names that stand out to me. I really love what you have at West Brunswick, like a program that has had success in the past with different coaches, getting someone established like Edwards to go down there. And then Terry Sanford, again, like that at certain points can be kind of the big dog in Fayetteville basketball. And getting Jake Wolfel, who did a fantastic job and stayed at South Granville for so long to turn that program into something. That's a home run hire. I also like kind of the immediate effect Grant Hodges will have at Alexander Central. They have a roster that kind of fits his style. And then also, I think it's important. I'm interested most in seeing what Jason Cosby does at Cox Mill. Cox Mill is a place that has a history. They have a nice athletic talent base. And in previous years, and we're seeing it this summer, they've kind of lost a little bit of that, people transferring out. If he's one of the coaches that can kind of calm the storm a little bit and get the Chargers back to where they're used to be.
Now we go over to some of the girls' basketball changes, a couple programs that made some big moves. I think one of the things that stands out to me, J. Mike, is that there are some pretty prominent coaches who are on their way out, and that being Patty Evers at East Bladen. She helped lead the Eagles to the state championship this past season, and they had a regional runner-up finish 2 years ago. You have Myers Park, who Barbara Nelson turned things over to assistant Jalen Dillard. And then, as we had mentioned, North Pitt, who won the state title 2 years ago, Antoine Pittman goes from there to West Craven's boys program. These are some big changes with some long-time household coaching names, J. Mike.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing if East Bladen can kind of keep it going because Patty Evers kind of did it the old-fashioned way, like no transfers coming in, just kind of developing the roster you have. And they were a mainstay in 2A or 1A, depending on where they were, where they landed from year to year. And she was a McDonald's All-American game, like head coach of a McDonald's All-American game. But that area, I'm interested in seeing, can they carry the torch? Can they keep it going in future years? Because it's when you're in a really rural area like Elizabethtown, North Carolina, the program is almost synonymous with the coach. So, the people will still kind of grow up there waiting to play for East Bladen girls basketball. I'm most intrigued with that one because I think there is some talent there and big shoes to fill. But I think East Bladen in the 2A East, looking at the new lay of the land and A classifications, could still be a team that we're used to seeing making deep playoff runs because they're going against a lot of the same schools they were going against already.
I'm going to bring back in Joel real quick. Joel, we discussed the coaching changes and different AD moves. One that I think you and I have talked about a little bit has kind of popped up on our radar has been some of the moves that Wake Christian Academy in Raleigh has made in the NCISA. We didn't have him down on the list, but, TJ Graham, the former NC State star, becomes their football coach. Levi Watkins, who also played at NC State for basketball, and coached a long time at the Division I level with Ole Miss. Most recently, he was with the Wolfpack. He takes over the boys basketball program there. And, they got a big AD hire as well. They actually went into the Chicago Cubs organization and got one of their player development staff members who had been working more on the educational side of player development with Latin players out in Arizona with the Cubs. But he has like principal experience. So they just did a complete overhaul of their athletic department, and St. David's School, not Wake Christian. But you look at what they've done, it stands out a lot. And there's not that premier NCISA school that's truly dominated Raleigh, but St. David's is in that place.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have wondered, why has the East caught up to the West in certain sports like football? Why in some sports is the East better than kind of like the Charlotte teams? I think the reason why is because the presence of the NCISA schools in Wake County is not quite what it is in Mecklenburg County. Like Providence Day, Country Day, Latin, Charlotte Christian, all these schools are so kind of dominant. They have such, kind of good standards at these programs and in all sports, really. And in Wake County, the schools here have not really fully got a hold of the area. So like Ravenscroft, NRCA, St. David's, Wake Christian, these are programs, these are schools that have the ability to do that. They just haven't really done it yet. I think what St. David's is doing is very interesting. I think they might see that kind of in Wake County, how there really isn't a private school that's kind of like really taking Wake County by the horns and going like, yeah, we're going to get some big name coaches in here. We're going to try to attract some kids here. And I think it's interesting that they're going this direction. I'm very curious to see how it kind of pans out over the next couple of years.
J. Mike, as we get into the fall, are there any fall coaching changes or just changes across any sports coming into this new athletic year that stands out to you?
I'll have one because we're getting to the fall here. Jan Dowling, who was a longtime volleyball coach at West Rowan, going kind of next door to Cabarrus County and Cox Mill. Cox Mill is a program that has had all sorts of volleyball talent for a number of years. And then in recent years, has been kind of a revolving door at head coach. She's a longtime head coach who can bring some stability and also just great direction to a really talented group of what to do. I think that's a home run hire for Cox Mill. They needed stability and needed a proven winner, and they got that. So look for the Chargers a little bit in this fall. I know we've had them on our radar the last couple of years in a row. They were state runner-up 2 years back, but again have had 2 head coaches and 1 interim coach in the last 2 years alone. And stability is on the way for Cox Mill.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good hire there. And obviously it doesn't hurt that she's going to get to work with Jordan Gray, who's a Louisville commit, and then Elena Walker, who just pledged her commitment to Morgan State as a setter. Staying in volleyball, some changes with Chapel Hill volleyball stand out to me, but I'm going to take soccer route. I'm going to say Pal Williams, who was with Weddington's soccer program on the boys' side, making the move over to Palisades in Mecklenburg County. That's another one, J. Mike, that really stands out just because of all that he was able to accomplish in his time at Weddington.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Weddington has been on the map for a number of years. And Palisades is a newer school. They've had a few graduating classes now. Has not really established a soccer dominance, but there's an opportunity to do that, as we talked about several times in this podcast, and this show, and other ones. When you have A classifications, it's a new field. You don't have to go against the same schools anymore. So maybe he sees an opportunity to develop Palisades into an 8A West team that we have to think about in soccer.
A lot of coaching changes across many sports in the state of North Carolina. If you'd like to see all of the football coaching changes that have happened this past offseason, you can do so on HighSchoolOT.com. HighSchoolOT also has coaching trackers that are going on for boys basketball, girls basketball, and baseball. So if you want to see all of those coaching changes, just step on over to HighSchoolOT.com, and that information is available to HighSchoolOT insiders. Other things you can see up there if you are an insider are statistical leaders across volleyball and soccer in all 8 classifications. That is something that you cannot find anywhere else. Who is going to be leading each class, the top 25 going into this fall for those 2 sports. And like I said, statewide rankings, area code rankings, they're going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks, including some feature stories from High School OT's Jonas Pope. If you have not seen already, he did a feature on Millbrook's defensive duo of Rashad Streets and Quentin Cipher. They are two of the highly ranked recruits in the country. And then over at Rollsville High School, they have 4 players in the top 10 of the 2027 rankings there. And Jonas had a chance to sit down with several of those players with the Rams. Both of those programs are top 10 in High School OT's preseason rankings. Both of them are also in High School OT's Jamboree. That is presented by the United States Army, 2 Men in a Truck, and Alpaca Peruvian Chicken on August 9th at Trentini Stadium on the campus of Wake Forest High School. Admission only $10. Come on out to the High School OT Jamboree. There's going to be a ton of really good football action throughout that week. There are 4 teams across High School OT's 2 football jamborees that are in the top 25 rankings that we mentioned earlier. Cardinal Gibbons and Rollsville, that is a top 10 matchup at 7 o'clock, and Millbrook plays in that 9 o'clock slot. And then on August 15th over at Southeast Raleigh High School, you have the Bulldog Bash powered by High School OT, that finale. Southeast Raleigh and Jordan, the Falcons, checking in High School OT's preseason top 25 as well. For Evan Moesta, Joel Bryant, and J. Mike Blake, we will see you next week on the High School OT Press Box.